A recap of Saturate Altoona and a behind-the-scenes look at local pastor Matt Hornberger. All that and more coming up now on Join the City True Stories. Join the City is a program highlighting people and organizations having an impact in our city. All too often, we hear about the problems and the dysfunction in our culture, but we are coming with a different approach as we take a look at the good things going on right here in our community. I'm Bethany Marshall, and you're about to see what God is doing in our city. We want to thank our program sponsors, Park Home, for the donation of furniture used in our studio, Made by Vogel for the contribution of many props in our studio, and our platinum sponsor, Harry's Construction, for their ongoing support of Joy in the City. Seeing the church come together for a common goal is what has just happened during the month of June. Saturate Altoona was an idea birthed out of the Blair County Pastors Network, and we will be talking with several pastors who organized this event.
Well, gentlemen, we just came off of 4 wonderful weeks of Saturate Altoona. We've been involved in the planning of this for many months, and I just want to kind of get some feedback now that we are finished with the 4 sessions in June. First of all, talk about why we did this outside 4 nights as opposed to the single night inside like we did 2 years ago.
Well, one of the things that we had discussed about the Join the City worship night at the Mishler is that leading up to that series, we had done a citywide sermon series where a bunch of churches were doing the same sermon series in their church, but we really didn't get a chance to hear what the other pastors were saying, to really worship together over that period of 5 weeks with the churches. And so we're like, well, what if we just make this a citywide series outside and do it multiple weeks so that we can really come together as the church for this series rather than just a one-time event to kind of top off the series at the end.
Early in the year when we first started talking about this, we were still uncertain of what COVID being inside and COVID things would have an impact, and that was one of the factors, maybe not a key factor, but one of the factors we thought about going outside. Yeah. So what are some of the feedback that you've heard about these outside events, these 4 weeks at Heritage Plaza? What's some things you've heard?
I mean, I have come across many people who just told me almost besides the first night, but we have to keep doing this again, or just kind of, getting the churches together. But I think that's the biggest thing, though, is seeing the churches come together, because, I don't think it's any secret, really, that, this has been an issue that has been going on in the past with churches not uniting. And now God is doing something here in Altoona within the faith community, within the churches. And it's like spreading like wildfire throughout our churches and congregations. And so not so much doing it again per se or keep doing it, but just, seeing the churches coming together is what I feel people have been really excited about the most.
Yeah, the encouraging thing to me, I've heard the same thing. Let's do this again. Are you guys going to plan something later in the summer? And I think we heard a lot of that after the Mishler event. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, you got to do this again. You got to do this again. I was hearing that at businesses and as I was meeting people in our church. And so then we tried it 4 weeks, and they're still saying, let's do this again. So I think it does really resonate with people, is they like to get together. And I think the outdoor setting just added to that.
Also, you mentioned COVID, though. I mean, we just came out of 2020. I often say 2020 don't count for anything. 2020 don't count. But, I mean, so we went through a season of isolation, and so people are coming together, and outdoors is obviously the safest place, because we do want to be mindful of those that, because not everyone is vaccinated, and we have all that. But people are coming through this season of just feeling isolated, and they have been out of their communities and their church communities and their relationships. So people were just, I feel, were so eager to get back into a bigger body.
So Tim, the idea for Saturate the City, Saturate Altoona, came from an idea that of an organization that you were already connected to. And once you brought that to us, it was something that we kind of adopted. So talk a little bit about the concept and and what that was about that you felt would be applicable to us here.
Yeah, we at the CMA district conference back in October 2020, we had a gentleman come and he spoke to us. His name was Dave Bidell. He worked with an Alliance church in New York City and Brooklyn, New Hope, Urban Hope Church, New Hope Church. And he started an organization called Saturate. It was Saturate New York, Saturate USA. The whole concept, and he's coming from the background of a tree business his dad had, and he tells the story about after they cut down all the trees and the brush, this what he called piddlewood is just the bark and stuff, and his dad would say, go ahead and clean up this big area, and he thought, there's no way I can do this, it's too huge. And his dad said, here's what I want to teach you. He said, you put your feet down, you just rake the stuff up in a circle, get some other guys do their circles, and once it's all in little piles, we'll go gather it up. And he said he used that analogy in New York City because there were a lot of hurting people, a lot of stuff people needed to know that somebody cares, people needed Jesus. And so he says, what we're going to do is we're just going to put our feet down in certain areas, Brooklyn, Staten Island, and we're going to rake up these people in little piles, tell them about Jesus, pray for them, and we can get the job done. So it kind of breaks it down. When I left that conference, I thought that would be a neat concept to share in Altoona, because with 30,000 homes, there are a lot of hurting people, and maybe too much for one church, one person, definitely. But how about if we get all of our 25 or 30 churches together and reach out to those people? And it seems like it could be done. So that really was what God was talking to me about back in October, and then when I shared it with you guys, it seemed like it just picked up steam.
So in these events, we had 4 different nights, had 12 different speakers, multiple denominations, some men, some women. We had worship leaders from throughout the city and worship teams kind of coming of a hodgepodge of people involved in this. Then we also had a pile of people serving with tables and giveaways. And Richard, talk a little bit about that. You oversaw that portion of things.
So we had more than 20 churches that signed up to host a table that was simply giving away something to bless those that were there. Some gave away food, some had activities for kids, but it was a simple way for the church to just come together, be unified, and we're not doing this to make money. It's not a fundraiser. It's just purely to bless those who are coming, but it also gave opportunity for people to come early, grab something to eat, and hopefully have some time to actually mingle and see friends that they maybe hadn't seen in a while, have conversation, and hopefully develop a stronger camaraderie with the churches across the city.
How many churches would you say in total were involved in some capacity of this?
We had 25 churches that had signed up to be involved ahead of time, but then there were other churches that got involved as things went on. I stopped counting when we kind of had over 30 churches participating.
Yeah.
And that would be also ministry partners that weren't churches, like ESL, WTLR.
So we had such a plethora of connectedness from ministries, churches that came together for this. It was just remarkable.
Troy, I think I've been thinking about that, and I think that was just as much a part of Saturate Altoona event, having those giveaways, having the churches there, because you would see people from the downtown area that we would really like to share the love of Jesus with, and they were coming for food. They were coming to get something to eat. Yeah. And at those tables, they were met with a smiling face, with pleasant people. I don't think there were any churches there trying to promote their ministries and come to my church, to my church. But it was that whole idea of unity that we set out to say, somebody cares, stop by. It doesn't matter what church it is. It doesn't matter what group it is. But you're going to get something to eat. You're going to have a pleasant person talk to you. And I do think that the fellowship, the mingling among the churches, I think that was one of the, maybe something that I wasn't expecting coming out of that, because I was thinking mostly the 6:30 to 8 o'clock service. But that 5:30 to 6:30 time, I think, was probably just as important as the 6:30 to 8 service.
Larry, the Salvation Army was part of some of that. What did you see and your people see in developing some of those giveaways and ministry opportunities?
I'm gonna just piggyback off of what Tim had said. There was a good handful of, I want to say, homeless and people that struggle with poverty that we see downtown coming to these events. But there's one last week, this past Sunday, the very last Saturate Altoona night. There was a gentleman who would sit up front. He was wearing a Steelers jersey every single night he was there, and I was sitting in the back by the gazebo, and I want to say maybe it was the beginning or toward the end. I forget exactly when it was, but there was just this young girl who came up and just gave him a big hug, and really, what I see is that people were really being intentional on reaching out to people, loving people where they were. It doesn't matter what you look like or what you smell like or what you dress like. That we're gonna love you just as you are, where you are in life, and so that really just stuck out to me specifically, and just seeing the church do that. And there's one thing that we've been saying, these last couple of weeks, where just this is not the end, but this is just the beginning. And I believe that through the mingling and reaching and being intentional and reaching out, we're going to start prayer walking, we're going to start doing all these things. But my prayer is that we will be intentional on still meeting people where they are.
In a moment, we're going to come back and talk about the next step. But first, I want to take a look at the recap that we created from this event.
And if we want God to come and saturate our city, that starts with us. That starts with Christians.
God, give me the desires of the diligent. That's what a saturated life looks like. So who's going to bless others in a town such as this? You're it. Who's going to pray for the poor and the weak? You're it. Who's going to spread the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ in Altoona? You're it. Who's going to help the sick and suffering addict that's out there struggling? You're it. But aren't you glad this evening that nothing can separate us from the love of God which is in Christ Jesus?
The Altoona Church, that means we let go of our buildings. And we come together, leaving those walls behind us. And we serve God by the Spirit that binds us together.
Holiness is not about showing God how good we are. It's about showing the world how good God is.
God can use you tonight, and I want you to know that you are purposed, you are equipped, and that the exact same power that rose Jesus from the grave is still alive in you.
God calls us to be boots on the ground, and we do that through prayer walk, to pray on site with insight.
What can I pray for you for tonight? What's your biggest concern? What's most on your heart?
God has you here for a purpose, and He has a purpose and a plan for your life. But it's not just about you, it's about somebody else.
Because you're gonna be saturated. You are gonna be saturated. But what are you saturated with? Because if you're saturated with muddy water, there is no way clean water's coming out of you.
If you do not know Jesus Christ, if you've never invited Him into your life, I encourage you tonight in saturation, before this night ends, that you humbly bow your heart before the Lord Jesus Christ. Invite Him to come into your life.
So now we've seen the video of a recap of all this, and just the magnificent atmosphere. There was no agendas from any certain churches. It was just a combined agenda to glorify the Lord. And this, we mentioned, is not the end, but this is actually the beginning. Tim, if you can, here again, since you're familiar most with Saturate, talk about what is next and what are some of the things that is on the plan for.
Sure. One of the things that just stuck in my soul when I heard Dave Bidell talking is that he said it and he was talking to a group of pastors, and he said if somebody comes up to the front and says, I need help with some mental illness, or I need help with some doctor's prescriptions, I need help. A lot of us can't help that. But if they come up and say, I have a loneliness problem, he says that lays at the church doorstep, because we have the cure for loneliness, and that is to be a friend, call, build relationships, share Jesus with them. And so I've been really thinking about that since way back in October, is that we have the cure for loneliness in the church, and that is to be a friend. So Saturate really is all about going around, knocking on doors, talking to people on the street, saying, number one, that we care. Somebody cares for you. And number two, how can I pray for you? Can I pray for you? Is there something I can pray about? And then sometime maybe in that conversation, or as you begin to visit with them, find out how your prayers were answered, is, can I share Jesus with you? So the old lighthouses of prayer idea of prayer, care, share, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so you go and you just, first of all, tell them somebody cares. I care. Our church cares. The city of Altoona churches care. How can we pray for you? Is there some need you have? Write that down. Go visit them a few weeks later and ask them how that's going for them. How is that prayer being answered? And then maybe down the road they'll say, why are you doing this? Well, because Jesus really does love you. Can I share Jesus with you? So it's that whole prayer, care, share lifestyle that I think Saturate envelops very well.
Well, I think it's magnificent. The concept of this, and I know we had a wonderful time, all 4 weeks, and I know people were blessed, but this is the launching into the next step. This is by no means the end result, the end. And I believe even in talking to people, everybody was like, I'm looking forward to what's next. And I think everyone's anticipating that. So I think this was an absolutely blessed event, bathed in prayer, bathed in service. And I thank you guys. Looking forward to everything that we see in the future. And I'm sure we'll talk again about some of this stuff. So thanks for your time today.
Absolutely.
Today's Platinum sponsor is Harry's Construction, whose motto is, if you can dream it, we can create it. Recently opening Harry's Construction Kitchen and Bath Center so you, the consumer, can see examples of the variety of services provided by the team at Harry's Construction. Regardless of the project size, Harry's team approaches each project as if it is his own home. Be sure to visit Harry's Construction Kitchen and Bath Center at 114 Main Street in Bellwood. You can also visit their website to see pictures of home improvement projects over the years. Thanks again to Harry Halk and the team for supporting Joy in the City.
Made by Vogel is a father and son business that produces high-quality handmade wooden products such as cutting boards, bowls, bottle stoppers, and more. Products for sale can be found on their Etsy site or in downtown Altoona at the Clay Cup. You can't go wrong buying from Made by Vogel.
Today we will get a behind-the-scenes look at Pastor Matt Hornberger.
I'm Matt Hornberger, pastor of the 4th Street Church of God. I graduated from Millersville University with a degree in psychology. Never really worked in that field too much. I worked in sales, which is a good way to use your psychology degree. One thing about is when I was a child, I was a very sick kid, and I am the product of those little white-haired lady prayer warriors who got the evangelical congregational church in Myerstown, Pennsylvania, prayed and prayed and prayed for a sick little boy, and that was me. So I always had a heart for those kinds of people. The people, I can relate to them, I think, in a way that's pretty significant, and never doubt the power of prayer. And it's funny though that you come through that and you'd think that from that I would have this great testimony in Jesus. I was a rebel. I was awful. Went off. I was the prodigal for a long, long time. Got my degree, like I said, and then started in sales and met my wife And we moved up here because our firstborn child was born, and a couple weeks after that, her father died. And he was 50-some years old. So we moved up to Altoona, and that's how we ended up in Altoona. And I worked for Value City Furniture, and then we moved to Michigan. And the one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that when we were in Michigan, we lived in Detroit. And Leanne's a country girl from Altoona, Pennsylvania, and we lived right outside of the city of Detroit in Garden City. And it was urban, and she just did not like it. And about a year and a half earlier, we were in Grand Rapids, and we had been offered to purchase a fishing camp way up north, 5.5 hours north of Michigan, of Detroit. And it was a year and a half ago, and that deal had fallen apart, and we couldn't come to terms, whatever. And I'd moved to Detroit in the meantime to be the operations manager of the store. And out of the blue, a phone rings and says, "Whatever offer you offer, we're going to take it." So we all made this ridiculous offer, and they took it. So we packed up 3 kids and my wife, cashed out my 401k, bought this ratty old fishing camp way up in northern Michigan, and we moved into a cabin that didn't even have a toilet. 3 kids and a wife and a fishing camp. I mean, it was a 2.5-hour drive to a shopping mall from this place. It was like Mayberry North. It had Young's Bait and Tackle. I remember walking in there. You could buy the whiskey, the gun, the bullets, and your fishing tackle, and you could gas up your boat. One store, 3 brothers. And it was that kind of a little town. And so we were kind of lost, and the people were very friendly, and we were just moving in, and I was building this toilet, and there was a little sign down the road that said Vacation Bible School. Now, remember, we had been attending 4th Street a little bit. We weren't really committed. We're just kind of going to church because it was a tradition every now and then, and we really weren't walking with the Lord. And when we were in Michigan that whole time, no, we had never darkened the door of a church for years. And Leanne goes, "I'm taking the kids down to Bible school." And that's where we met the Wards, this wonderful Baptist church and this little Baptist family. And they just loved us. And it wasn't anything special, but from that love, we started working together in this church, and you just saw a community come around, and we were part of something that was just so special. And that's where we started to grow in the Lord, and that's where the whole movement comes. I was baptized up there with my 2 daughters in a lake, Pickerel Lake. It was pretty cool. It was actually very cool. Cold. In fact, because these aren't man-made lakes, these are spring-fed lakes, and that water's pretty cold. So they just nurtured our family and loved our family to the point where it was one of those relationships where they could just drive by if one of their kids had to use a bathroom, just run in the house, that kind of thing. It's very small towny, and they just loved us, and we started to actually grow in the Lord, and that's where we started to serve. And we served in youth ministry, and the Lord just poured it out. It was ridiculous. It was, we ended up having more people in there on a Wednesday, kids, than we had on Sunday. And it was just this chaos, and it was just this wonderful chaos. And there's kids there, people were coming to the Lord, and it was like this big eye-opener that the Lord has something better for me to do. Circumstances brought us back to Altoona in 2003, and that's when it was full on. I went to Christian Bible College and Seminary, started studying, got a master's in Christian counseling, and John Neely said, "Hey, I'm going to be going on vacation. Why don't you get up in the pulpit?" I was like, "I'm not a preacher." He goes, "Just go ahead." And that's how it started. It was like 2005. It was in studies, and I would talk to John, and my goal was that I saw John being that pastor of the church. He's a wonderful shepherd, but there's so much demand. So many people need one-on-one prayer and counsel, and I could come along and help him with that. And that was my goal, was to get this master's so I could come alongside John, and he could be the pastor. I could take some of that load off of him, and we could start working with people in a better way, because we're a small ministry, but we had a good outreach for, a place for healing and people of joy. That's our mantra. That's one of our vision statements. And that's what we seek to be and to do. Over the course of a couple of years, I was in the pulpit in several different churches and along the way. And I was never really too sure. Still thought that what I was called to do was to talk one-on-one. I still love and prefer to talk to single people about their journey and about what Christ can do and what Christ has done and all that. And then you realize that it's really not about preaching. It's about relationships. It's about loving people and about learning about people and about exploring their journey and being a part of that journey and seeing where the Lord is taking you from here to there. And we'll do that for them too. And getting people in front of Jesus Christ in new ways and original ways. And so that's always been a part of my heart, because I've seen the power of prayer in a way that a lot of people might not have seen. Because I remember when I was a little kid, laying on that bed, you had that moment in your life where you come to realize that God is real and you're going to be okay. And that moment came when I was out of my surgery. I was getting chemo. I was this traction machine, and I wasn't able to do much at all. And they took me down for testing. And unbeknownst to me, my dad's was working for the Pennsylvania Fish Commission, and one of his deputies had purchased a giant box of red gumballs. Big. To me, I'm a 10-year-old, little kid back then, so the box is about this big. It's probably big. But anyway, so I'm getting wheeled back from my treatment in the bed. And, you feel terrible. You can't eat. You're throwing up all the time. And I look up in this big yellow box full of red gumballs. And it was that moment where, a box of 500 gumballs to a 7 or 8 year old kid is like jackpot. And so I always remember the little red gumballs as that moment where God says, you're going to be okay. One of the unique things about 4th Street is they're a very tight-knit group. They began in that neighborhood. Now they've all since moved out of that neighborhood, and they all come back to that church. They love their church. But they are a very fun-loving, very warm group, very welcoming group, authentic group. And they're not afraid to share their journey. It's not a lot of pomp and circumstance, not a lot of puffiness, not a lot of pride. It's just some down-to-earth, salt of the earth people, hardworking, and a lot of them are easy to love. Not all of them, but a lot.
If you have a personal story you'd be willing to share with our community, we'd love to chat with you about it. Please contact us at 814-944-1948 or by email at stories@jointhecity.org. That's all the time we have today. Thanks for watching Joy in the City True Stories. Let me encourage you to watch other episodes of people and organizations having an impact on our community on ABC 23 at 5:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. every Sunday. You can also catch us each week on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Until then, be encouraged because God is moving in our city.